Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Randy Bock. I'm here today for our September episode with Andrei Radulescu-banu. He is a foreigner in both senses. He's not from Newton. So you'll notice his non-Newton accent when he speaks. He's from the far distant town of, how do you say it, Lexington. We might have a border with Lexington. I don't actually think so. It's close, though. And they do things a little bit differently, some maybe better, maybe worse. We're going to talk about the essence of politics in the small sense, the polis, the people, the root word of the Latin word for politics, and the public, which are all the same word. They have town meetings there, and so they have a lot more people, and they have maybe democracy, maybe not, who knows. And we're going to talk about how democracy figures in to city governance, how it's working here in Newton versus there. So we're going to have a comparison issue, and you'll notice his accent is actually, hint, from the name and his accent. He's actually from Romania, so we might even, factor in some aspects of what it was like to leave from behind the Iron Curtain when it fell, what that's like, how governance was there, how it is here, how things are getting better or worse, and so forth. Anyway, so thank you for coming along for our ride. Andrei, tell us a little about yourself, your journey, or journeys plural, wherever you want to step in on that intro.
Thank you for the introduction, Randy. So I met you a number of years ago when you sponsored a few kids from Romania, from less affluent towns, and you housed them in your house, and you showed them the New England, I suppose, and the camps and the schools, and that was so wonderful of you. So this is Education and Enrichment for Romanian Children. It's a foundation that you helped.
Yes, I highly recommend it. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience for us. We got to give a little bit, but the kids were great, and we learned a lot from them as well.
So I want to say I was maybe like one of those kids. I was from a big city, from Bucharest. I grew up, I was 18 at the time of the 1989 revolution. That was quite an experience to actually live through a revolution. That's not something that everybody gets the chance to do. And then I came to the States. I studied math at MIT. Then I became a software engineer. And a number of years passed. I became interested in local politics. And the trigger for me actually was the math curriculum in schools. I'm not sure how long we should talk about that. But I got really interested, and I got to learn local politics from the bottom up, if you want. Mm-hmm. And I became a town meeting member in Lexington. We can talk about the form of government in Lexington versus Newton. I've been on the appropriation committee for a number of years. That's one of the finance boards. And professionally, just went from one engineering job to another, and now I'm starting a company. It's called Analytic Hub. It's for AI, for enterprise, and for local government. Maybe we can talk about that.
Okay.
Also.
Well, let's start with the simple stuff. How do we create world peace and save? No, I'm just kidding. The simple stuff is let's talk about the difference between Lexington and Newton.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't live there. You don't live here. How are things functioning? What is it like in a town meeting? First of all, how many people are in a town meeting? Are they the equivalent of city councilors? Are they more like the, say, ancient Roman concept, or maybe actually the Athenian concept of democracy, with the demos, the actual people show up and vote by referenda?
Yeah. I think that's the concept, is the Athenian city-states. Maybe the small New England towns with open town meeting are even closer to the old ideal. In Lexington, we're large enough that town meeting is actually elected. We've got 9 precincts and 21 members elected from each precinct. It's about 190.
189?
100, yeah, something like that.
That's my math there, right there.
Really like a mini Congress, if you will,
yeah.
Which works in Lexington because there's this culture of volunteering and offering time. So that's the good thing about our town, and a culture of participation and encouraging people to weigh in.
So when 189 people show up, I assume not everybody does. Is this to do the budget? Is there a mayor? How do we navigate the ship?
Yeah.
I mean, I think cities in a way are like cruise ships. They're moving in a certain way, and
yeah.
when you want to turn them, you don't get to turn them. A little bit like water skiing. You kind of have to accept that there's a certain amount of inertia, school budgets and whatnot.
Right,
How does that all get figured out?
Yeah, there is, inertia is good and bad in this case. There's a budget process. We have a select board of 5 select members. That's the equivalent of the mayor in a city. So basically, they're the executive, if you will. They work with the town manager. The town manager pretty much is the, I want to say, the authoritative source on what could be done. But, well, he's implementing things, but the policy is set by the select board. And when town meeting meets annually, for us it meets in March, then we get to vote on articles to basically tell the select board what the direction should be. But the planning takes a whole year, the whole budget process. And by the time something comes in front of a town meeting, you gotta be really careful how you approach it. So some people complain sometimes that there's not much you can change in town meeting because of all this preparation work that needs to be done. Like, for example, there's a big capital project, there's a school being built, a police station. We can talk about the new police station in Lexington, which there's been a bit of controversy there. By the time the project comes for vote in town meeting, even for multiple votes, you can maybe change some things at the corners, but it's difficult to make a radical change. And if you want to make a radical change, you need to engage yourself in the process earlier than town meeting.
So, well, I'd like to hear what is, if you can be concise about the objection to the police station.
Yeah.
Is that a political thing as the mood of the time? And then how are the monies being appropriated to schools, and how closely do you get to monitor what happens in the schools?
Yeah, so about the police station, the old police station was old and in a very bad shape and too small for the function. So a new police station had to be built. The controversy is that we got a very large police station that some say, and I agree, it's out of place with the center of the town. We've got the government offices, we've got the Carey Memorial Building where town meeting meets and there's like festivities, and the police station is almost the same size with the Carey Memorial Building. Now, it's a bit more complicated because once you get to build a police station, sometimes the process takes a life of its own, and maybe that's what happened here. And you also asked about the schools.
Yeah, I mean, there are things happening in the schools here. We were in the national press because of course the kids need drag queen story hour. I was always wondering, if a Mormon evangelical or a Christian evangelical showed up in the schools for Jesus hour, whether that would be as fervently pushed by the faculty and so forth. But of course, there had to be drag queen story hour at presumably some city expense and clearly by allowance and whatnot. So there are cultural aspects going on. We have, the school is its own cruise ship. It represents an ever-expanding amount of our city budget. I think it used to be in the 40s. Now it's up to like 60% of our budget, and I don't know how that ever stops.
Yeah.
And then it's unionized. They have their own schedule. They seem to just have, I'm not sure what you can do about all this stuff. How closely managed is there a separate town meeting for schools, or is that its own entity?
Can I answer the first thing first, which is the more controversial part of the question. The question is about sex and gender education in public schools. Specifically in Lexington, there's a curriculum called Serious Talks that's being proposed for this fall. And some parents have spoken, have expressed concern. Most parents support it. But this is basically the discussion that is being had. My kids are not in school, so I haven't followed this as closely, but it is a subject that is being discussed. In terms of budget, you say 66% in...
Well, it's over 60% of our Newton budget is devoted to schools.
In Lexington is 72%.
Oh my.
It's possible that the percent of student population relative to adult population is actually larger in Lexington. I don't know the statistics. The schools are governed by
or you have fewer other expenses.
Right. Yeah, so sometimes the larger school districts have fewer expenses per student. I followed this a bit more closely a few years ago when I ran for school committee. It was kind of an abortive campaign. It was triggered by my interest in the math curriculum, to be sure school kids get a good education in elementary math. Yeah, so the schools are overseen by the school committee, and there's a school superintendent who works with the school committee. The school committee proposes a budget to town meeting, and the town meeting pretty much has an up or down vote on the budget, but it doesn't get to decide how the budget is used, except for capital expenses. So those fall under town meeting prerogative. Like school construction, curriculum, books like technology, that's actually town meeting at the proposal of the school committee.
And so what are the issues currently in Lexington? What is the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times there?
Well, I think it's a good place to be. It's a place where people feel free to speak and to even speak on controversial things, and that's a very healthy thing. It's a place where we have a culture of local government. So, for example, there's the citizenship classes that are organized, I think, every year. I've taken the citizenship class, I want to say, about 10 years ago. So it's really like serious, like 10 sessions where each session you go to a department, like the fire department or the police department, you get to see how they work. And so we have this culture that we're maintaining of kind of living together and being open and discussing what needs to be discussed. Now, there's always controversial things also, and a bit of controversy is always good because it kind of keeps the engine running, if you will. Mm-hmm. One discussion, and I know that you've discussed this on one of your earlier shows in Newton, but one is about zoning. That's a big, that's been a big debate. It's basically this decision to open up zoning and allow more construction in the town center along the MBTA routes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a big issue for us.
I've been supportive of that. It's been kind of passed with razor-thin margin. So from my perspective, it's a good thing. We're not seeing the changes because this will take years to basically see the construction. It's possible it's going to go awry, so we'll see. We may have to come back and adjust as we go along. But that's an example of a discussion that kind of could go either way, and where you want to kind of keep an independent mind.
Your city's going to get to vote on that of itself, correct?
It's been voted already. It's been
but
approved.
that is a Lexington decision, correct?
That was a Lexington decision,
right,
yes.
Because we've had a separate thing during. I don't know if you remember, there was this crazy thing. They called it a pandemic or something. I forget. A few years ago. My memory's not that good.
2020.
Yeah, but no, hindsight is 2020. Anyway, they had this this omnibus bill on Beacon Hill, and I guess a certain number of pages. I actually read part of it on a show maybe a couple episodes ago. Crazy stuff, just endless appropriations. Like there's going to be a new sidewalk in Framingham. There's going to be this, all this kind of like handing out candy bars, like the troops arriving, handing out all these little tiny gifts. And one of them happened to be that around the actual T, not the MBT, not the commuter rail, but the green line, the red line, all that kind of stuff. If a non-Boston town touches one of those subway lines, they are obligated to, within 1,000 feet, whatever, a certain number of feet, couple thousand feet of that train station, put in, like right away, thousands of units of housing at each station. Mm-hmm. And this is in the face of a population that's stagnant.
Yeah.
Massachusetts in general.
We're losing population.
Yeah, people are. I mean, where are they going? It's not. Pandemic aside, people are not just dropping dead. People are actually leaving. They vote. You might be familiar with this concept. They've been voting with their feet.
Right.
Do you know anybody who voted with his feet?
I probably yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, voting with your feet is when you take off and you leave a jurisdiction because it no longer is that enjoyable, habitable. Right. We have the luxury here of moving from state to state so far, and people have been leaving Massachusetts because the state tax rate goes up. And this is the kind of thing we've been fighting against here, because you might notice we are the Newton Taxpayer Association. We're not just associated. Everybody's a taxpayer. Yeah. But we are concerned about how much we pay, and I'm just going to leave a tiny side note here that we recently had an override election. It was a big monumental decision here, and we won. We won the basic overturn of the override. There were three, but we won the biggest one, and it had to do with the city not having, I don't know, $40 million to do X, Y, and Z. They wanted to expand and do all these kind of schools and so forth when their own enrollment has dropped. The enrollment's gone down in Newton schools at 13%. Across the board, has not come back, and was COVID related because they closed the schools during COVID, and the kids went to private schools, Catholic schools, all that kind of stuff. They have not come back. And so this is a product that's failing. You know, you're in the business, in the marketplace. If your business, like, you know, you're making, I don't know, whatever, a computer, something, and your sales go down 15%, they don't come back, you get fired. You know, and so we didn't fire anybody yet, but lo and behold, the city miraculously, there's an article I'll maybe pull up from the Newton Beacon, it's going to be too small to show, that they found $20 million, like under a mattress or something like that. Oh, and they have, you know, it was money we were going to spend. Anyway, it's like, dude, why did you do this override? Why do you put us to, and this money they suddenly found, if they had done the override, would they have given it back to us? I don't think so. Anyway, those are some of the issues that are happening here, with this kind of duplicitous aspect and so forth. But maybe, I don't know if you want to touch on either the voting with your feet concept, having you know, kind of experienced some of that governmentally.
So you're saying many things, and it all makes sense, but there's a lot of things to kind of digest. Maybe the most important thing to talk about is that we want a state and a town that is affordable, that provides services to residents, that is a nice place to live in, and that is practical, that it makes life simpler, that it's easier to get to work when you need to get to work, and that, you know, creates a good environment. It's got good schools and everything. I think the best thing we can do is just be practical and kind of leave ideology out and just kind of follow our seat of the pants, and we'll be fine with it. We have some of these discussions that you're describing in Lexington as well. Maybe we're not as far down the road. For example, we don't have a taxpayer association in Lexington. But we do question things, and it's the kind of discussion that we need to have. Now, in the context of construction, there's been kind of bipartisan support, if you will, like razor thin margin. The case for being practical is that basically you don't want to overregulate construction. If you overregulate, then the prices go up. And the case was that by loosening the rules a little bit, actually we facilitate prices coming down and having housing be a bit more affordable. Now what I'll say is that it can't be the only thing where we loosen the rules up. We have to be smart about other things to be a bit more relaxed, so that we can keep, you know, things affordable and livable, so that people don't vote with their feet.
Well, I agree with you there, and you bring up some reasonable points. We don't want to be solely partisan about that. I mean, there are things about which to be partisan, no doubt. But you know, one of my sons is kind of a libertarian, and he mentions Tokyo, that there's really no zoning in Tokyo, and Tokyo gets to build organically. And when an area is kind of useful and, you know, desirable and so forth, there's a lot of building going on, and areas less so. So the buildings happen where they should happen, and then the prices, you know, basically equilibrate accordingly, because, you know, the supply and demand. That's the law. So I get that, and I'm not trying to be obstructionist about it, but I've brought up this concept called the covenant, which is actually also a really excellent book. Separately, I've read it, but the covenant is a pact between the city and its people. So if you come into an organization, let's say you, I don't know, join a gym, and you are a golf, let's say you join a country club, and you pay $100,000 to join the country club because you love golfing, and they have golf. And all of a sudden, you're $100,000 in, and they say, you know what, we love having you here, Andrei, but you know, we had some plans that we're putting apartment buildings on the golf course. So thank you so much. You can still play golf around the apartment buildings, and there's going to be a little putting green and so forth. You're like, well, that's not what I purchased. I have a covenant with you, a contract. So anyway, the golf clubs don't do that because they actually have good covenants. So they say, oh, you're joining into this. If they do decide to sell out to an apartment building, every member gets a payment. So I'm going to use the country club example, so for when people move into Newton or another town. they're moving into under certain zoning requirements. They have a covenant, they have an expectation. So if you're buying on a quiet, leafy street, you're not expecting a methadone clinic to open across the street because of the zoning. You're not expecting a 15-story building because of the zoning. Now, if you have a financial interest and they have a fiduciary interest towards you to protect your interest, and I don't think that's what happens. I think actually you get sold out. You personally, collectively, in the city, when the city changes things peremptorily and meretriciously on their own, when they just do it. And I think there are financial pressures, no doubt, but I don't think that the city's citizens benefit from it. I think that people on the side benefit from it. So we have city councils, and you can't ever follow or trail the money, but I think there are things that happen. People get, on a federal level, people, get wealthy in government, and they get wealthy because favors are being sold. I'm not implying that per se here, but there is a certain impetus and push. And I think that if in Lexington, if you're going to do it, fine, but you're voting on it. You're doing it as a compact.
So many things there. So the zoning is voted by town meeting in Lexington, and it can go to a referendum in case people don't approve, but that wasn't the case. And I suppose in Newton, zoning is decided by the town, by the city council.
Well, they can make variances.
Okay.
I'm not a zoning expert, but I'll leave it at that. They have changed things when they want to.
But zoning, you're right. Zoning is a type of a covenant. It's a type of agreement where you get a guarantee that what's next to you is something that you agree with. On the other hand, there has to be a bit of flexibility, and you have to let new things be built. And there's a history to zoning where I think the concept started in the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken, and kind of built from there. To pass any kind of change, it required 2/3 majority. And basically, enough momentum was built that at some point, the only thing that can be built is single-family homes that are built to the limit of the setback. In Lexington, one of the problems is that around 2000, there's been a shift in construction where the size of the houses pretty much doubled. So in the past 20 years, we have these very large houses, single-family, and it's a case where I would say people who are wealthy enough who afford to build things, they get all the benefit because they can afford to kind of move into town, and they can pay the average price of 2.7 million or whatever it is. But people who can't afford it cannot move in. And that's a problem because you want diversity of income and you want a representative sample of people to come in, and we don't want to live basically our life to be determined by zip code. So something needs to change, and I think this MBTA zoning was an effort to change it. We'll see how it plays out. And now I'll give you an example where zoning has not played out well. So there's been a parcel near the Cambridge Reservoir that supplies water to the city of Cambridge, which was zoned as for manufacturing. Now, I may be getting the details wrong, and zoning is really complicated, so please check your references on this. But just because by right something could be built there, there's been a project with solar panels that was proposed next to the reservoir, and there's 4 lawsuits right now fighting off the fate of that project. And zoning allowed it by right. So that's an example of a project that can be very controversial where zoning maybe should have been stricter. So I guess the answer is there's no one size fits all, and we have to have a discussion.
Right, well, that's the interesting part. So you are part of a town meeting. What do you do with your salary from being a town member?
Well, the salary is a grade 0 for town meeting members and for committee members for the select board. I don't worry about myself for like a few evenings in March, but the select board members, it's almost a full-time job.
So we're rounding out the half hour here, and we have just a few minutes left. I'd like to leverage some of your AI, computer knowledge, math skills, and so forth. Tell us some of your ideas on how that big AI in the sky might change things on a city landscape and/or in politics.
I think it will change politics, and it will change many things, because one thing is you can't control AI speech as much, so it's going to open things up. In Lexington, we have a project. We're going to work with the high school students to basically chat with public records and to make an interface to the town, if you will. So we'll see how that plays out. I think many things will change with AI. We've got to be a bit careful with the implications, but from what my thinking is, it's mostly a positive at this point, and we should be a bit less afraid of it than some people say.
What specifically are you working on that is in coordination with cities and towns?
So, for example, instead of calling the town to ask a question, just have a chat interface that can answer you the question in a nutshell.
That's nice.
Wouldn't that be great for transparency?
No, I like that. I actually wrote an article, all of you can go find it. It's called Chat CCP, not GPT, but CCP for emblematic of the our potential overlords in East Asia. And it's the chatbot with flair. And it's kind of talking about how you might put something towards the LLM, the large language, models, and you might get a good answer as long as it's an answer that complies with some of the political statutes and ethos of the time. So I recommend you check that out.
Okay.
As far as kind of like the I guess filtering of knowledge and so forth, I'm just curious, how does the town meeting, if you can maybe capsule, we went over this a little earlier, how does the town meeting guide the ship of state in Lexington? Where do you think it's headed in the short and or longer term? 1 minute.
I think we're headed in a good direction. We've got some good things going. We just have to watch the big capital projects, the expensive schools. We haven't even touched on that. We have to watch public transportation, which is actually not doing very well. Mm-hmm. And we've got to keep the town affordable. If we do those things, I think we're going to do well. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. I do want to make a note that I have referenced Lexington in past episodes as having a relatively high rate of funding their future pension liabilities, and Newton has not done as well. Although I was a little bit schooled on this topic by a former city councilor who had come on and says they have kind of a different methodology and so forth. Anyway, I think that there's been a little bit perhaps better financial guidance from the members of the town meeting. So I want to thank you, Andrei, for volunteering to come on today and volunteering in general and being part of the political process. And it's incumbent upon you as an American citizen, a Newton citizen, and or Lexington to do the same and take upon the burden mantle of responsibility to guide our ships. So thank you so much for being with us. Please find us on Facebook at Newton Taxpayer Association. For some reason we have 2 different pages, but you can contact us through either one of them. You can find me out on social media, and I'm not Randy Block, who is running for office as well. A lot of confusion. I wish him luck, and maybe he'll ride on my coattails or vice versa as time goes on.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Andrei.